In the year 1874, four men descended into the Delvin's deep coal mine in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, searching for missing miners and an explanation that would satisfy investors. They carried lamps, ropes, and revolvers, but found tracks too long for humans and inscriptions on the walls, scratched by the hands of those who were no longer alive. What awaited them in the depths, in a throne room of coal and bones, left only two survivors, scars on their memories, and horror that no report could contain. My name is Samuel Carter, but everyone called me Sam. That year was my third season as a detective's assistant, and my job was to take notes, keep track of evidence, and keep my revolver handy when things took a turn for the worse. Marcus Holloway hired me after I helped him solve a case of arson at the Pueblo train station. He said I had eyes that see what others miss. Now I understand the bitter irony of those words. In Iron Hollow, my eyes saw too much, and my brain refused to accept what it saw. Our leader, Marcus Holloway, was a man who was difficult to intimidate and impossible to deceive. A former marshal with a graying mustache and a scar on his left cheek, a knife wound sustained while arresting the Dunning brothers in '68. He believed in neither God nor the devil, neither luck nor curses. Only facts, evidence, and the six-shooter Colt on his belt. When Cornelius Blackwood, the mine owner, came to our office in Denver with a request to investigate the unexplained disappearances of workers, Holloway didn't even blink. He simply named a price that made Blackwood pale, and when Blackwood agreed, he realized that the case was more serious than it seemed. The third member of our team was Edgar Price, an explosives and mining expert hired specifically for this investigation. 35 years old, strong build, hands covered in old scars from burns and cuts. Traces of 15 years of working underground. He knew the mines like a priest knows his church. Every creak, every draft, every shade of darkness meant something to him. Price didn't talk much, but when he did open his mouth, his words were worth listening to. He took on this case for the money, that was no secret. But I saw something else in his eyes. The professional curiosity of a man who had spent half his life underground and thought he knew all its secrets. We arrived in Iron Hollow on February 23rd, when winter still had a firm grip on the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. The village was exactly as I had imagined it from Blackwood's stories. A handful of wooden houses huddled together at the foot of the mountain like frightened sheep. The main street, the only street, ended at the black mouth of a mine entrance, above which hung a faded sign reading Delvin's Deep. Snow lay everywhere, dirty with coal dust, and even the freshly fallen blanket took on a grayish hue within a few hours. We were put up in a house that had once belonged to the shift supervisor. Now it stood empty, like many other houses in the village. Blackwood warned us that most of the workers had left after the disappearances, and those who remained refused to go down into the mine. Superstitious fools, he said at the time, and in his voice I heard not contempt, but fear disguised as irritation. We spent the first evening studying the documents Blackwood had given us. Lists of the missing, mine diagrams, witness statements. 7 people had disappeared in the last 3 months, all experienced miners, all gone during their shifts, and not a single body had been found. The last was Jacob Delvin, a foreman with 20 years of experience, father of 17-year-old Thomas. His helmet was found on the middle level at the intersection of 5 tunnels, but Jacob himself seemed to have been swallowed up by the darkness. On the morning of February 24th, we saw fog for the first time. Thick, milky white, rising from the gorge and enveloping the mine entrance so tightly that it was invisible until noon. The locals called it the breath of the mountain, but there was no poetry in their voices. Only quiet fear. We were going to enter the mine right after breakfast, but we were delayed by an unexpected encounter. The old man appeared as if out of nowhere. Wizened, stooped, with white blind eyes that nevertheless looked straight at each of us. It was Eli Delvin, Thomas's grandfather, and the locals stepped aside for him as they would for the plague or a prophet. His bony fingers clamped onto Holloway's sleeve with a strength I didn't expect from a man his age. The old man's voice was hoarse, like iron scraping against stone. "You are going to the king, gentlemen. He is not asleep, he is waiting. He has already taken my son. I will not give up my grandson." Holloway tried to break free, but Eli held him tight. The blind eyes turned to each of us in turn, and I could have sworn he saw us, saw right through us. "Can you hear the crown creaking? He's trying it on your head. There are no dead people down there, only his collection. Your father is not waiting to be saved." Your father is now part of the darkness." He addressed the last words to someone behind us. I turned and saw Thomas Delvin, a thin teenager with eyes burning with stubborn determination. He had been standing there, obviously watching us from the moment we left the house. The old man reached out to his grandson, but he took a step back. "Grandfather, I must find my father." "Your father is dead, boy, but you can stay alive. Listen to me just this once." Holloway finally freed himself from the old man's grip and adjusted his coat sleeve. I could see he was nervous. His hand touched the handle of his revolver for a moment, a gesture that betrayed his inner tension. "Thanks for the warning, Mr. Delvin. We'll take your concern into account. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do." We moved toward the mine entrance, leaving the old man standing in the middle of the street. I glanced back once. Eli was saying something to Thomas, holding him by the shoulders, but the boy was struggling. I didn't think much of it at the time. We were professionals, here to expose either sabotage by competitors or a gang of robbers using the local superstitions to cover up their crimes. The entrance to the mine was a rectangular opening reinforced with wooden beams blackened by time. The rails for the carts disappeared into the darkness, and even in the midday light, we couldn't see more than a dozen steps ahead. Price lit the kerosene lamps, one for each of us, and we went inside. Before we continue, write in the comments, have you ever been to places where the darkness seemed alive? Your opinion is important to us. The first few hundred steps passed without incident. The tunnel was wide, and the ceiling was high enough that we didn't have to duck. The walls glistened with coal dust and moisture, and our lamps cast strange shadows on them that moved with us. The smell was musty, but not unpleasant. The usual smell of a mine, a mixture of dampness, coal, and old wooden supports. We had walked about 1,000 steps when the first strange event occurred. My lamp flickered. It didn't go out, but flickered, as if something had momentarily blocked the flame from within. I checked the wick, but it was fine. There was enough oil and the glass was clean. A few seconds later, Price's lamp flickered. "Draft," he said, but there was no certainty in his voice. "Strange. There shouldn't be any drafts at this level." Holloway didn't answer. He stood motionless, peering into the darkness ahead. His right hand rested on the handle of his revolver again. "Someone's here," he said finally. We froze. I strained my ears, but heard nothing but the distant sound of dripping water. And yet something had changed in the air. It had become thicker, colder, as if we had approached an invisible boundary. "It was just my imagination," Holloway said after a long pause and moved on. But I saw his eyes. He hadn't imagined it. We reached the first fork when we heard footsteps behind us. All three of us turned at once, and a familiar figure appeared in the light of our lamps. Thomas Delvin, out of breath, with a kerosene lamp in his hand. "I know the mine," he blurted out before Holloway could open his mouth. "I know it like the back of my hand. Every tunnel, every turn. You'll get lost without me." Holloway gave him a long, hard look. I expected him to send the boy back, but instead he nodded. "Stay close, and do as you're told." Thomas beamed, but it was the smile of a man going to war. Equal parts determination and fear. The four of us moved on. Thomas was right. He really did know the mine. He showed us the safe passages, warned us about weak sections of the floor, and named each tunnel. His father had taught him all this, and now that knowledge was leading us to where Jacob Delvin had disappeared forever. On the second level, we found the first traces. Price noticed them first. He stopped so abruptly that I almost bumped into him. His lamp was shining on the floor of the tunnel, where something unlike anything I had ever seen before was imprinted in the coal dust. The print was as long as my arm from elbow to fingertips, elongated and three-toed. Each toe ended in a deep groove, like a claw or pickaxe. I crouched down and placed my palm next to the footprint. It didn't even cover half of it. The skin on my back broke out in goosebumps, as if someone had run an icy finger over it. Price silently measured the distance between the footprints, using his own steps as a measure. His face paled in the lamplight. 2 steps tall, he said finally. More. The tracks did not lead forward along the tunnel or backward. They went up the wall, becoming shallower as they rose, and disappeared on the ceiling. Whatever it was, it walked on the walls and ceiling as easily as we walk on the floor. Holloway examined the tracks without comment, but I noticed him pull out his revolver and check the cylinder. Thomas stood nearby, his eyes fixed on the prints on the wall. His lips moved silently, either in prayer or in a curse. We continued on our way, but the atmosphere had changed. Now we moved more slowly, more cautiously, checking every step, evaluating every sound. The lamps flashed more and more frequently, and with each flash, the darkness beyond their light seemed to grow thicker and hungrier. On the third level, Thomas found his father's helmet. It lay in a side tunnel, almost hidden by fallen rock. The distinctive dent on the top, a reminder of an accident 3 years ago, left no doubt. It was Jacob Delvin's helmet. But there was more than one dent. Next to it was another, fresh and deep, a puncture wound, as if something sharp had pierced the metal from above. Inside the helmet was a little dried blood, too little for a fatal wound. Thomas took the helmet and pressed it to his chest. He didn't cry. His eyes were just empty, like someone who had gotten the answer to a question he was afraid to ask. The smell came suddenly, dry, suffocating like hot anthracite. I coughed, my eyes watered, but there was something else beneath the coal-like heat. A Swedish note, organic, like old meat that had been lying in the cellar too long. My body reacted before my mind could comprehend. My stomach clenched, my heart beat faster, and every muscle tensed, ready to run. Price pointed to the wall. In the light of our lamps, scratched letters appeared, uneven, hasty, but still legible. He sees without eyes. I recognized the handwriting from the notes I had studied the day before. It was written by Henry McGuire, the third miner who had gone missing. The letters toward the end of the inscription became increasingly jagged and uneven, as if the writer had been in a hurry or had been dragged away. We stood in silence, looking at these words. Somewhere deep in the mine, there was a sound, a metallic screech, as if iron were scratching stone. It lasted a few seconds and stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The echo carried it through the tunnels, multiplying and distorting it, and when it finally died away, the silence seemed even heavier. "What was that?" I asked, though I didn't expect an answer. Thomas turned to me. His face was white as chalk. Father talked about that sound. He said it was the king counting his subjects. Holloway opened his mouth to say something, but changed his mind. Instead, he just waved his hand forward. We continue. The intersection of 5 tunnels was located on the middle level, in the very heart of the mine. Here, old and new workings converged, forming a space resembling an underground hall. The ceiling receded into darkness so high that our lamps could not reach it. The walls were covered with years of coal dust and strange markings, vertical stripes arranged in groups of 5, as if someone had marked the count with their claws. "This is where my father worked his last shift," Thomas whispered. We stopped in the center of the intersection. 5 tunnels diverged from us like the rays of a black star, and a chill emanated from each one. I slowly turned around, peering into the darkness, and for a moment it seemed to me that something was moving in one of the passages. A tall, dark silhouette that dissolved as soon as I focused my gaze on it. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, from something deeper, more animalistic, rising from the most ancient corners of my brain. An instinct that screamed, "Get out, run. There is danger here that you cannot understand and cannot defeat." But we didn't leave. Professional pride, Holloway's stubbornness, Thomas's desperate hope, all of this kept us in place. The sound returned, closer, clearer. A metallic grinding, turning into a rhythmic tapping. It came from one tunnel, then another, as if the source was moving around us faster than any living creature could. Price took a stick of dynamite out of his bag and weighed it in his hand. I knew he wasn't going to use it. In a confined space, that would be suicide, but the mere presence of the weapon seemed to give him confidence. The sound stopped. The silence was almost palpable. It pressed on my ears, my chest, my thoughts. I could hear only my own breathing and the pounding of blood in my temples. And then the smell came. That same coal-like heat with a Swedish rot. And I knew it was close. Very close. Holloway fired into the darkness of one of the tunnels. The roar of the shot hit my ears. The echo rushed through the underground, and when it subsided, we heard another sound. Footsteps, slow, measured, heading in our direction. "Back," Holloway commanded. "Slowly. Don't turn around." We began to retreat, holding our lamps in front of us like shields. The footsteps grew closer, and with them, the shadows on the walls began to move strangely, as if something enormous were casting them from impossible angles. I saw it first, or rather part of it. A long arm that emerged from the darkness of the tunnel, grabbing the edge of the stone wall. The fingers were 3 times longer than human fingers, black with 3 claws at the ends, curved like miners' picks. And then a face appeared. No, not a face, a head. Elongated, noseless, with a horizontal slit for a mouth and two vertical slits for eyes. They glowed with a dim, cold, gray light that had no source, and above the head was a crown. 5 uneven bony protrusions, black and shiny like polished anthracite. They weren't worn. They grew directly from the skull. The creature emerged completely from the darkness, and I understood why the ceiling of the intersection was so high. It was made for this place. It was more than 2.5 times my height, even when crouched. Its body was elongated, impossibly thin, like a skeleton covered in wet coal dust. Its skin was black with an oily sheen, and something crimson glimmered dimly in its cracks. It didn't rush at us. It didn't scream. It didn't do anything an animal would do. A predator that had caught its prey. It stopped and looked at us. It tilted its head to one side, and the bone crown made that same metallic grinding sound we had heard before. It studied us, assessed us, and there was something far more terrifying in that gaze than simple hunger. Holloway fired 3 shots. I saw the bullets enter the black body and exit the other side without leaving a trace. The creature didn't even flinch. It just kept staring, as if the shots were nothing more than mosquito bites. And then it took a step, 1 step, and it was 3 steps closer, though there was almost no movement, as if the space between us had folded in on itself. It raised its long arm and pointed at Thomas. The boy froze. Not out of fear, but out of something else. Something deeper. As if this gesture had pinned him to the spot with invisible chains. The creature made a sound. Not a voice, but something like a long, dry exhalation. 2 of the 4 lamps went out. In the ensuing twilight, I could see only a silhouette. Tall, motionless, crowned with a crown. An eternity or a few seconds passed? I don't know. And then it was gone. It didn't retreat or run away. It just ceased to be where it was. The shadows closed in, and the crossroads was empty again. My legs gave way. I sat down right on the floor, not caring about the dirt and coal dust. My heart was pounding so hard that I could feel every beat in my throat, my temples, my fingertips. My hands were shaking so badly that I couldn't light the extinguished lamp. The matches fell from my trembling fingers. Price managed it faster. His lamp flared up, dispelling the darkness, and I saw the faces of the others, pale, frozen, like death masks. What was that? I croaked. No one answered. Holloway was reloading his revolver, methodically, mechanically, as if the action could restore his control over the situation. Thomas was still standing motionless, staring at the spot where the creature had been a second ago. It knew my name, he said finally. It didn't say it, but it knew. We left the intersection the same way we had come. No one suggested continuing the search. No one argued, not even Holloway, who usually insisted on finishing the job at any cost. We just walked, quickly, silently, trying not to look back. Price brought up the rear of our group. His lamp lit the way behind us, and every few steps he glanced over his shoulder. We were already on the 2nd level when his lamp went out. I heard a sound, a short cry, cut off mid-word and something like a crunch. I turned around, raising my lamp, and saw an empty tunnel in its light. Price was gone. Only his hat lay on the ground, and on the wall were 3 deep grooves, rising upward and disappearing into the darkness. "Run!" Holloway shouted, and we ran. I don't remember how we covered the remaining distance to the exit. I only remember the sound of my own footsteps, Thomas's heavy breathing beside me, and the darkness that seemed to be closing in on us. We stumbled out of the mine at dusk, pale, trembling, and 1 man short. None of us slept that night. We sat in the house where we were staying with every lamp we could find lit and said nothing. Holloway cleaned his revolver over and over, the same mechanical ritual. Thomas clutched his father's helmet and stared at the wall. I tried to write down what I had seen, but my hands were still shaking, and the letters came out uneven, like a child's. Towards morning, Holloway spoke. "It's not an animal," he said. "An animal would have attacked. An animal would have killed immediately. This," he paused, searching for the right words. "This is something else. It thinks, it plans, it studied us." I wanted to argue, to find a rational explanation, but I couldn't. He was right. The creature wasn't behaving like a predator. It was behaving like a king inspecting his new subjects. "We have to go back," Thomas said. We both turned to him. The boy looked 10 years older. Dark circles under his eyes, a hard line around his mouth. "There's another place down there, deeper than the crossroads. My father told me about it." An old mine that the first miners accidentally broke into 20 years ago. They found a cave there, as big as a cathedral. No one has gone down there since. Holloway looked at him for a long time. "You don't have to go, boy," Thomas shook his head. "I have to. My father is there, or what's left of him." We returned to the mine the next day when the fog had lifted. Now there were 3 of us, and each of us carried 2 lamps, spares in case something extinguished the main ones. Holloway took his entire arsenal with him: 2 revolvers, a knife, and a hunting rifle he borrowed from a local shopkeeper. I knew the weapons were useless against the creature, but their mere presence gave the illusion of control. The descent to the lower level took several hours. The tunnels became narrower and lower, the air heavier and colder. At times, we had to make our way through debris left by long-ago collapses, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the mine itself was guiding us, like a hunter guiding its prey into a trap. Thomas led us confidently, although I could see his hands trembling every time we passed a place where his father had once worked. He knew this mine like the back of his hand, but whatever lived here knew it even better. A metallic grinding sound accompanied us the whole way, sometimes distant, sometimes close, always somewhere beyond the light of our lamps. The creature was watching us, I was sure of it. It was letting us go like a shepherd lets sheep into a pen. The cave opened up suddenly. The tunnel simply ended, and before us lay a darkness that our lamps could not penetrate. We stood at the edge of something enormous, and I could feel the vastness before me with my skin, like a draft or a change in pressure. Holloway threw a stone forward. We listened as it fell. A long time, several heartbeats, before the sound of the impact reached us from below. Then he took a step forward, and his lamp illuminated the beginning of a stone staircase carved into the rock. The steps were uneven, worn, clearly older than the mine itself. We descended into a cave that the locals might call the King's Throne Room, if any of them dared to come down here and survive. The ceiling was lost in the darkness. Our lamps couldn't reach it, and I could only imagine how high it rose. The walls of the cave were smooth, polished by something that was neither water nor time. In the center of the space stood something resembling a throne, a massive structure of coal and bone, black on black, visible only because the reflections of our lamps played on its surface. And around the throne, in concentric circles like rows of courtiers before a king, were arranged miners' helmets. I counted several dozen before losing track. In the outer circle were fresh ones, including the helmets of those who had recently disappeared. I recognized the Delvin's deep markings. In the middle were helmets from the early days of mining, stamped with the 1950s. And in the innermost circle, at the foot of the throne, lay something that was not a helmet at all. A Spanish helmet. A conquistador's, with a characteristic crest, covered with centuries of patina. And next to it, a human skull with clear teeth marks on the bones. Black Crown had been here long before the mine, long before the city, long before this land was called Colorado. The miners did not disturb his sleep. They simply dug their way to his throne. Thomas walked between the rows of helmets like a sleepwalker, and I couldn't stop him. He was looking for one specific helmet, and found it in the penultimate circle from the throne, Jacob Delvin's helmet with its distinctive dent. The boy knelt down and picked it up. At that moment, the darkness behind the throne stirred. The creature had been sitting there all this time, motionless, like a statue, invisible in the absolute darkness. Now it rose, unfolding to its full monstrous height, and I saw it for the first time in its entirety, in all the horror of its form. It was at least 3 times the height of a human when it sat hunched over. But now, as it rose, it grew and grew until its crowned head disappeared into the darkness high above us. Its body was elongated, impossibly thin, a skeleton covered in wet coal dust with oily black skin, in the cracks of which something crimson, like coals, glimmered dimly. Its limbs were long and irregular, its joints bent in both directions, and its fingers ended in 3 claws curved like miners' picks. Its head was elongated, noseless, with a horizontal slit instead of a mouth that never opened. On its skull was a crown, 5 sharp bone protrusions of varying heights, black and shiny, as if lacquered. It was not worn on its head, it grew out of it. Its eyes were 2 vertical slits, glowing from within with a cold gray light. It didn't breathe. It didn't blink. It just was. Ancient, patient, hungry. Holloway stood between us and the creature, raising his rifle. I knew it was useless. We both knew. But he stood there anyway, shielding us with his body. "Go," he said. "Both of you, now." The creature bowed its head, looking down at him. The bone crown made a familiar grinding sound. Thomas stood up. He was still holding his father's helmet, but his eyes were fixed on the creature, and there was no fear in them. There was something else, something I didn't understand. "Wait," he said. He took a step forward, past Holloway, past me, straight to the circle of helmets. He stopped where his father's helmet lay and slowly, carefully placed his own helmet next to it. "I came for my father," he said, addressing the creature. His voice did not tremble. "Now I know he is gone, but his place here is mine." The silence was so absolute that I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. The creature looked at the boy, motionless, inscrutable, ancient as the earth itself. Then it slowly bowed its crowned head, as if considering the proposal, and raised its hand. I grabbed my revolver, ready to shoot, even though I knew it was useless. But the creature did not attack. It simply pointed its long black finger toward the cave exit. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed Thomas by the shoulder and dragged him away before the permission was revoked. Holloway followed behind us, gun raised, backing toward the stairs. We were already halfway to the exit when it happened. The creature appeared right behind Holloway. Not out of the darkness, but out of his own shadow, as if it had materialized from the very darkness he cast. I only had time to shout. The warning stuck in my throat, and saw a long arm descend on the detective's head, the prongs of a bone crown bowing over him as if in a salute to an equal. Holloway didn't scream. He just disappeared, swallowed up by the darkness so quickly that I didn't even have time to blink. We ran. We ran down the stairs, through the tunnels, over debris and forks in the road, without stopping, without looking back. My lungs burned, my legs buckled, but I kept running, dragging Thomas behind me, who stumbled at every step. We escaped from the mine at dusk. I fell to my knees right in the snow and couldn't get up. My body refused to obey, exhausted by fear and running. Thomas collapsed next to me, breathing heavily, still clutching his father's helmet in his hands. Behind us, the black mouth of the mine stared silently into the night, and somewhere in its depths, I knew, the creature sat on its throne of coal and bone, crowned with a crown that grew from its skull. It let us go. Not because we escaped, not because we won. It let us go because it wanted to. Looking back one last time, already at the edge of the village, I saw, or thought I saw, a glimmer of gray light deep inside the entrance. And for the first time, the slits of its eyes formed something resembling a smile. Old Eli was waiting for us at the doorstep of his house. He didn't ask what had happened, didn't ask where the others were. He just looked at Thomas with blind eyes that saw more than any sighted eyes and said, "I knew you'd come back." He let you go. Thomas nodded. He was too exhausted to speak. Cornelius Blackwood and I met in Denver a week later. He listened to my report in silence, staring out the window of his office. When I finished, he opened the safe and took out a wad of bills, enough to buy 3 houses. "This is for your work," he said, "and for your silence, forever." I took the money. I had no choice. I could see in his eyes that the alternative to silence was not publication, but disappearance. Thomas did not take the money. "I don't need it," he said. "I'll keep quiet anyway." Who would believe me? Blackwood officially announced the closure of the mine due to structural instability. He sold all his assets in Colorado and left for Europe that same year. They say he died in Vienna in 1989. His will contained a strange line: "Let no one ever dig deeper than necessary." I returned to Denver and used Blackwood's fee to open a small printing shop. I never took on any more mining-related work. In fact, I rarely took on any work at all. The printing shop brought in enough to live comfortably and stay above ground. Thomas inherited his grandfather's house and reputation. The locals began to come to him for advice, bypassing Iron Hollow. He never married, never left the village, and every year, on the anniversary of his father's death, he would go down to the mine entrance and leave a lit lamp there. I know what we saw there, deep underground. I know that the Black Crown is not a myth, not a legend, not a hallucination of a tormented mind. I know it is older than America itself, older than the Spanish conquistadors, perhaps older than humanity. And I know it is still there, sitting on its throne of coal and bone, counting the helmets arranged in circles around it.